I want a seat at the table, a room with a view.
Hi, I'm Victoria Detres. I use she, her pronouns. I am a producer. I am the RISE program manager.
Hey, I'm Nicole D'Angelo. I use they, she pronouns. I'm a music director. My most recent project, I was the assistant music director and script consultant for How to Dance in Ohio.
I'm PJ Jew. I am a music director, a former techie. I have been in Maestra for about 6 months.
Hi everybody, I'm November Christine. I am a composer, emerging producer, an activist, and an advocate.
Time for change in the air.
Hi friends, I'm so glad to be here with all of you today. Thank you for joining me at this first ever seat at the table discussion around Maestra and its impact that it's having on our musical theater industry today.
I have been in Maestra for about 6 months. I'm at the beginning of what I'll probably be talking about later, the MD experience with Maestra and Muse. One of the reasons that I hesitated on joining Maestra because I really thought it was for females only, female identifying people only, and I'm non-binary. So when Judy Yin-Chi Lee told me about it's for females and non-binary people, I'm like, okay, I don't feel like I'm encroaching.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, you were so wonderful to segue right into what I would love to start talking about, which is this incredible experience you had behind the scenes at one of the most successful musicals ever in the history of Broadway, Wicked. There was a special program, an experience there that was a collaboration between Muse and Maestra. It was called the Music Director Experience. Will you tell us about that?
Yes, it was definitely amazing. It was my first time behind the scenes at a Broadway musical, and a 20-year successful, long-running musical that Wicked is. It was just fascinating. I learned so much just being dropped in. I got to shadow Dan Michike, the music director. Saw him run through understudy rehearsals, learn how quickly and at what level of talent and expertise people work rehearsals at. We were able to do the entirety of Glinda's, the whole track in under an hour. I swear, 40 minutes. And that was Amanda Jane Cooper, who's a regular on the tour. Also got to see Laurel Harris do Elphaba under an hour. Yeah. And it's just like boom, 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 go, like sing every single note, and then Dan would give the note and they'd pick it up. If there's a question, it was resolved within a second and they move on. And I was directly able to use that experience in my MD experiences on other shows that I was working on after. I also got to watch all of the keyboard players. There's 3 different keyboards in the orchestra pit there. So key 1, 2, 3, got to know the people working there, see how the orchestra worked, see Dan give notes to actors and see how he gave them to the orchestra, see how things are run. Yeah, it's just mind-blowing. Yeah, it's fantastic.
There was one story you told me, we talked a little bit before this, where you talked about playing along with the keyboard.
Yes.
With cans on, so you could hear the band and see the cues.
Exactly. Wicked is, not all Broadway shows have this, but Wicked is one of them, and some other ones have kind of a ghost rig, or they call it.
Ohio has one too.
Yeah, so smart, substation. So it's also serves as the backup keyboard rig that has all of the programming for any of the keyboard parts. And I was able to get the book 2, the key 2 book. And we had the video camera for the conductor so we could see the show. And I could play along with the conductor with a live show. Nobody else could hear me. I could hear everything else. And the first time I did that, I teared up. It was so beautiful to play along. And also nobody could hear me, so if I screwed up, it didn't matter.
Very low stakes, nice.
Yeah, so I felt like you're part of it, but it's okay. Yeah.
Have you done that too, Nicole? Played a ghost?
Yeah, we have one at Ohio as well, and I felt very much the same way, where it was like, great, I can sit here and make all the clams I want. Nobody can hear it.
For somebody who's never played in a pit before, is that a relatively new idea to add that kind of feature in? Do you know?
I feel like since it's not at every show, I feel like it's kind of rare.
Yeah, that's my understanding too. I think it's rather uncommon.
Yeah, that's a really good training tool because think about it, to just throw someone off the deep end for live show can be terrifying and like it's not accessible at a lot of points. So actually that's a point of accessibility and that's really important.
That was obviously important to what Ohio's whole mission was, and I definitely appreciated it as somebody who was not just one of the autistic company members, but also brand new to Broadway. And I don't know what's happening here. I'm new here, so that was really great to be able to have that tool.
What other points of accessibility were you focused on when you were putting Ohio together as part of the team?
Oh, well, as part of the music team, a lot of our accessibility came with just being really mindful of people's learning styles. Something really cool that we had was an access survey, which was sent to every member of the company, disabled or not, autistic or not, where it would ask about people's preferred learning styles, accessibility needs that they might have in the room. It would ask, are there any things like that you would want to be removed from the room for you to be successful? So for us, I think a whole bunch of us on the team said, please, no perfumes, and we swapped out the soaps for fragrance-free soaps. So it was just, for the music team, it was all about, for the company, it was about learning how to just adapt and serve people so that they are most successful in the environment, which again, not only are we dealing with half our company's autistic, but also they're also all new to the space. So for them all to be in this brand new space that could be really high pressure, it was especially important for us to keep all of that in mind when we were teaching the music.
How incredible to have all those little details that you may not think of identified and talked about. Did you say you were on a committee of people who are sort of making these observations and changes?
Yeah, I was on the access team, so that was a team we had of 5 people, and we had some people come in and out throughout the process, and that dealt with making it accessible for the company in pre-production, all the way through making the audience experience accessible as well.
That's so groundbreaking, and I feel that the idea of allowing people to be human and allowing people to have specific needs is so fundamentally different from the musical theater world that I came up in. I'm a little bit old school.
I'm with you.
And the way I was taught in school and college was like, your job is to hide anything about yourself that is going to make you seem less marketable, less, you had to conform basically to whatever the Broadway standard was. And so, we were taught you don't ask for anything, you don't like fragrances, get over it, you have problems with your body, you better, do whatever you need to do. And it was so unhealthy. I really think I saw so many people that probably could have been successful in the industry ultimately have to choose other paths because they just couldn't squeeze themselves into whatever box was required. And I love hearing what you're saying, and I hope it becomes normalized across the board for even able-bodied people as well.
I think it is happening though. We're talking a lot about what is the standard that we've been adhering to that is actually not equitable. So what does new equitable structures look like? It's dismantling a system that doesn't actually speak to all the global majority, let's be real. So I'm really excited because we're seeing producers willing to take the chance, because you have to make the decisions from the top down in order to affect change, really. So I love that is an awareness point, but actually the implementation is so vital because we don't see it. And by doing that, How to Dance in Ohio set a new standard, and that's important.
Yes. I love everything you just said. Oh my God, that's amazing. I agree, because like November, I came up in a system, in an environment that was like, if you have a problem, that's yours to take care of. There's no one here who's going to make a special exception for you or something.
But it's just a new system of care. Like, why was that out of the equation before?
Well, that's interesting to me. So when did it change, or can we try and pinpoint when it happened?
I think it's a generational thing right now. I think we're not willing to settle, you know? We have high hopes. We can't, let's be real, let's talk about the world. The world's kind of on fire. So how can we create systems in which we're actually cared for? And I think the whole reckoning was not a reckoning because it was happening in small communities. And those small communities finally took leadership positions. And they were like, no, actually, this is a new point for us to access. So I think it's just, we were sick of it and tired, and we were like, these systems aren't working, and we still have to dismantle a lot of structures that aren't working. But I think the generation is kind of tired of not being seen, of not being actually held at the table, you know?
I love that.
I think what I loved too, one of my favorite things about the whole Access Survey experience is that the other half of our company is seasoned Broadway veterans who have 3, 4, 5, 6 Broadway shows under their belt, and for them it was like revelationary. Nobody's ever asked me before what I need to succeed. And they're leaving this experience being like, I never want to work on another show that doesn't have the same standard of care, the same level of care, because accessibility benefits everybody. And getting to see these Broadway veterans realize that in real time was just the coolest thing.
Oh, for sure. Well, and let's bring it back to Maestra a little bit too. So Maestra is also an organization that was created because of the need for community, the need for visibility, the need for support. And one of my favorite things, being a Maestra adjacent, but not really a Maestra member, we can hold hands and talk about that, are the amazing virtual technical workshops that are offered online for free, of which November has taught too. Will you talk about what that's like and what that means to you to be the teacher, the passer on of knowledge, things that you know, and for the next generation?
Absolutely. One thing I am always transparent about is that I am an experimenter, and I am quite comfortable failing. So when I approach people as a mentor, I'm really just the person that went ahead and fell in all those potholes for you so you don't have to. And that's how I approach it. I see a world where there's possibility. I acknowledge the fact that I don't actually know how to do this, but I see people succeeding, and that means I can too. I'm gonna mess up, but I'm gonna go in here and to see what works. So my most recent workshop that I did with Maestra was demystifying TikTok.
I really gotta watch that one.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing is, I'm not like an influencer at all, but you don't have to have 1 million followers to benefit from technology. And I see there's a little bit of a gap, there's Gen Z and they're doing the dances and everything. And anybody else who isn't, 20 feels like I can't, And the truth is, and I'm, I'll go ahead and say it, I'm 44. And I went there and I figured it out, and that's basically what I'm bringing back. Like, guess what? It's not that crazy, and your theater company, your small nonprofit, can benefit by just a few tools and just getting in there, playing around. And some things are gonna flop. Okay, you. At this point, nobody's really looking. So just play around, and next thing you know, the theater world has so many communities within it. And by using technology, it breaks down so much gatekeeping. It eliminates so many gatekeepers, and you can put out your own content. You can produce at a financial level that you can actually access and do, and you can build your own following. And once you've built that following, suddenly those people that weren't really looking at you, now they are. But you're the one with the power at that point. And that's really what I'm interested in. It's transferring power and allowing people that feel disempowered to say, this is a way that you can tangibly take some of that power back and get your voice out there to whoever you want to reach out to, not to who big wig producer wants to.
Can I just uplift what you said of like, you're not afraid to fail? You are such a role model because it's so, I was gonna curse. It is so scary to fail, and I think so much of us are scared, especially because there is this perfectionism in the work, especially as artists, where like a lot of us are perfectionists, right? But just seeing someone willing to fail sets a precedent. Again, like coming back to that earlier thought, you were doing so much for the people who look up to you and your mentees. So like, thank you for that.
Thanks.
Yes, I love that. I love that, and it's also really about like reframing the word fail, right? It's not really failing. It's just an effort that needs another one, or like you learn something every time you try something, right?
And it's okay to fail. So I used to be in technology. I ran a technology innovation center for Consumer Reports. So my former life,
I'm so happy
I was a
you made the tangent.
techie.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we did was it's what's called lean startup, and it's about iterating quickly. Like just like TikTok, you have to fail 99 times. Like people aren't going to care, but then there may be one that goes viral, and that's just the way it is. Previously, the more old school way of managing products, because so much money goes into it, you spend a lot of time, you put a lot of resources, and then 2 years later you realize the product failed. But in the lean startup type stuff, you do it as quickly as you can. You make it a smaller investment, maybe a week, and you see how's it doing. Another week, how's it doing? So it's different ways of thinking. It is kind of a more progressive way of building products or building your brand.
Right, and one thing I love about the virtual technical workshops is that they're free to everyone, to anyone who wants to, join the Zoom. And then if you, after the fact, if you miss it, you can come back and rent it. So I think I looked online, and I think your two are available. What was the other one you did? Not the TikTok one, and then you did audiobooks?
I did. Kind of, yeah.
I want to know about. I read about. I was like, what does that mean? Audiobooks out of musicals? Is that something?
Right?
What's that?
Yeah. I would say, what was it, 5-10 years ago, I was developing a musical, and the concept was huge. And I was like, I don't have $1 million. And this is before TikTok. I really wish that had happened at the same time. So this was
Okay, so we're just bringing it back.
Yeah,
come on.
Feeling it back.
We love a revival.
Purely.
the money goes.
Yeah. So yeah, I just was like, okay, well, I know how to produce music, and I have these actors that are great, and we can get in the studio, and so I was just like, let's just do the musical. We don't need costumes. We don't need a venue. I'm just going to dreamcast this thing, and we're just going to get in the studio, and we're going to do the scenes, and we're going to sing the songs, and it's going to exist like this. And we did little recordings of people in the sound booth, and we put it out on Instagram and stuff like that. And it was brand new back then, and but it was really, people were like, this is interesting. Like, I never thought about bypassing, the financial gatekeeping that happens when you can't afford an entire theater, to put something up. These things are built into the fabric of live theater. I mean, now you can do things live, you just have to stream it. But there was that fear, like, no, this is precious. Live theater is precious. You can't let technology invade and cheapen the experience. It's like, there are people that cannot afford to move to New York. There are people that cannot even visit New York to see a Broadway show. So are we, in our efforts to protect the preciousness of our art, we are closing off so many people, and so I think there's a happy medium where there's a world where both can exist and even feed into each other.
For sure. And watching some of the musicals that get film versions, is enjoyable. Doesn't mean I'm not also going to go buy a ticket when I can.
That's an interesting point to make, because I think oftentimes producers say, well, if we put it out on YouTube, or if we make it accessible to everybody, then no one's going to come. And I find it's the opposite. I find that people then say, I want to see it live. Exactly. I've seen it online, or I've seen it virtually. Now I want to be there in person to enhance the experience.
And you'll get some child in Kansas addicted, oh, I'm going to go and do that.
And then people know that they're going to like it before they go see it.
Yeah, and they're more willing to spend money on something they already like.
Exactly, they're more willing to spend money on more expensive tickets if they have that option, because they've seen it in the movie theater, they've seen it on YouTube, maybe not through the most legal methods, but maybe they watched a slime tutorial, I don't know. But that encourages people to then go and buy tickets, so they're not watching the show through a shaky camera in somebody's pocket.
Back to your, I think it's like $5 or something to rent any of the classes you all put on. One of the first experiences I had with Maestra was when I finally joined. I was like, look look at all these things I could learn. So I rented Mary Mitchell Campbell and a few other folks teaching about the technology used in Broadway. I think many of us came, well, you know, we just came from smaller companies or high school theater or regional. Actually, regional's quite good. Regional paid me very well.
Classical music world,
Right,
or something like that.
where everything is like, it's almost like bumper cars. You're just kind of figuring it out as you go. Nobody's getting paid, so you just put all your time into it. So I had picked up QLab somewhere because that's what you learn, and I picked up Ableton because I wanted to doing something down on St. Mark's. I wanted to be able to loop things, and so I just started using that stuff. Like I think it was like 20 years ago. And then starting to put my foot in the Broadway world, I don't want to look like a total idiot. So being able to watch those videos is like, okay, I got that. Okay, yeah, okay. And now I can see how they're putting those click tracks together, how these things work. And like, okay, there's only this big of a gap between what I already know and I've used versus what they're doing on Broadway now. That's pretty cool. Yeah. And then I also watched one, paid to watch one, Christine Order on what is it like to play on Broadway? What does subbing on Broadway mean? And just because when you start, you have no idea. I've never even heard of subbing on Broadway before.
Sure. And
yeah,
it's kind of the situation where you don't know what you don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's the whole premise behind Rise, right?
Yeah.
Like,
should I do a little?
Sure. Talk about it.
I do want to make a point about Maestra. It's meant to support the community. So what does support look like? Education is a system of support. We all want our musicians and our maestras to be supported. So if we can give an access point to education, that's huge because we're allowing you to find new steps in your career. But yeah, Rise. So Rise was launched last June, and it is developed for backstage administrative and creative professionals, but amplifying artists who are underrepresented. So women, people of color, non-binary, trans, deaf, disabled. It's really fighting the narrative that we don't exist, but actually here's where you can go and find them. And then in the programming of Rise, I went to our network partners, which are all beautiful organizations who are doing the work that we're not trying to steamroll. It's actually, hey, here's who you should know about. Muse is doing amazing work. Go reach out to Muse. But actually creating access points of, hey, I want to be involved with DEIA, but I don't know where to go. So go to Rise. We'll connect you to the right people, right? So we went to the community and we thought, what does it look like to just hold space for community? Well, how important it is to just be like, hey, let's meet for an hour where you meet like-minded musicians. Okay, let's hold the space, because it's so weird sometimes when we're all stuck in email. You don't even know what the person's face looks like. And it's like, oh, I actually can realize who's a good collaborator when I'm in the space with you. So what does it look like to actually provide a meeting point for our artists? And then it's a regional tool. So a lot of the work I'll be doing this year is going to different regions, meeting up with the Maestra regional groups and like hosting a coffee, because I think it's important that we all talk to each other, because we're gonna end up, like, you never know who's gonna be in your path 5 years later, right? So it is really important to
it's a small world, isn't it?
It's such a small world. Oh my God, the theater world is so small. It always comes back to something like when you like learn a software 10 years ago, you're like, oh, it's still there, I got it. Something that I learned about last year is really important 5 years later in my trajectory, you know? Yeah. So it is just holding space and what does support look like, and really evolving depending on the needs of our community. So we are really open to feedback and making sure that if you feel like your needs aren't being met, where are we falling short and how we can address that and evolve as we keep going.
Yeah. It sort of relates to what Nicole was talking about with all of the needs of the cast and the crew and the creators of How to Dance in Ohio. Yeah. Right? And just literally just talking about it, just naming it, and then the very simple idea of like, oh, well, we can address it.
We can address it. It's okay if transparency is really hot, you know, like we can talk about these things, and it gives us power, because our voices are our power, you know, and I think we kind of forget that, because a lot of the marginalized communities we're serving have not had a voice or a seat at the table.
Well, there's an amazing statistic that kind of goes along with that, because I'm sitting here on all these numbers.
Yeah, give me a good stat.
There was a study done for the 2018-2019 season. 75% of the pit orchestras on Broadway were all male. And now, if we look back at the 22-23 season, zero. There are no pits that have no women. So the work that Maestra, and in conjunction with Rise and 802, are doing to take stock of what it was like a couple of years ago and what it's like now, shows that organizations like Maestra have been successful in getting the message out that we're better when we hire more diverse people, when we are more inclusive. And I wonder how that shows up for you in your experience in Pitts, on the writer's side of things, on the administrative side of things, and in your work too, directing these programs.
I'll jump in. Since the MD experience, I've gotten 6 jobs. Thank you. I've music directed 7 new works.
Congratulations.
So I worked at Prospect Theater, the Musical Theater Lab.
Yep.
And I sub-MD'd for Julianne Merrill 5, the musical. So I did the workshop and investor concerts before it is now going to off-Broadway. And
It's a parody of 6.
it's a parody of 6. I think I won't say any more about it, but it's very fun, keeping this non-political, but it's very political. 6 is political. Lena Gabrielle is the MD of the off-Broadway one. I believe she was the assistant MD of 6.
Yeah.
Maybe on tour, yeah. And so that, and then I also MD'd the Maestra Holiday First Takes, the First Takes Holiday Edition. And from that experience, the in-person experience, which is so cool, I got to work with a bunch of maestras, 9 maestras in a band, additional singers, and from that, because I'm also a record producer, so I'm producing a record on an artist coming up, and we needed musicians. So I actually hired one of the bass player, Emily Davis, from that event. And what we were talking about earlier, Vic was like, I have a list. Don't tell me we don't have, that doesn't exist a person of color or a woman who can do this job. There are people. And I'm like, I need to do more work and do what you've done so that I have a list always, so I can be, I have the ammunition. So if anybody ever tells me that we can't find a female guitar player, I know one, and I know her name. Look her up right now, and I know she's amazing. But so it's been great. I'm getting paid, getting jobs, getting paid, and then hiring people.
It does just create a channel of communication. I think once you are aware that someone exists, right? You're like, okay, wait, like I can use you for the next. And again, it is about the collaborations that you're finding of like, that is important to just hold the space. And also it's like, again, coming back to the stakes, sometimes when the stakes feel so high, you don't feel like you have the space to fail or the not given grace in the way that you would love to be given grace. And I think by holding the space with different communities, you are allowing new access points.
And I think, once you do actually get a foot in the door, like I said, I'm old school. So when I was coming up, there was very much there can only be one attitude. I'm not saying I was a part of that vibe, but, there was that idea of like, oh, if you're the black girl there, you are the black girl there, and that is your job, and it wasn't a matter of holding the door open and making space and creating space. And so one thing that I've really loved in, the past few decades, honestly, and coming, of course, with the pandemic and George Floyd and everything, all of a sudden this all became very, very real, where it was the understanding of the entire culture needing to change, not just performatively, not just, oh, look, there are black people on stage, or there are women singing, but like who is producing, who is writing, who is directing, who's choreographing. And, so once you get in there, it's your job to continue reminding people that, I love this person. I know you've worked with them for 10 years. But they're literally doing 5 different things. I know this other human that's also really good. She's up and coming, and she's really good. Give her a chance and meet her. It doesn't even have to be like, you need to do this because diversity. It's like, no, you need a talented person. And I know talented people that just are also not a part of your golf team,
I have a stat about that. Of course I do. Of course I do. Okay, there were 105 available leadership positions on music teams. 15 of them went to women and non-binary musicians, and 85 of them went to men. 5 of the roles were shared by both a woman and a man. But within those leadership positions, the 20 female non-binary positions were held by the same 9 women. So yeah, there are people who are stretched thin doing 5 jobs at once because there's a call for diversity, and because, as you were saying, there's a sense of lack of, I don't know who that person could be. Oh wait, I know 1 or 2 or 3. And so the same people are honestly invited in over and over again, but there are others. There are more than just 9.
It's only going to help producers and shows and writers and composers and musicians to hold the space for, to hold your hand out, get more assistants, get more seconds, because they may not have the experience right now, but they got the chops, and with 3 months or 6 months of getting in the mix of the professional world, they'll be there, right? And then we have more people to hire, so you're not calling the same person going, oh no, I hope they're available. They're not going to be available because the ones who have already gotten there are booked out for the next 6 months, and so we need a deeper roster of talent.
I've been thinking a lot about that inequity when it comes to the disability community, about how can we get into spaces with, particularly I can speak from my experience as an autistic person, the barrier that my disability creates in this industry is that this industry, A, is very, very social, very word of mouth, and B, is that there is no clear path. There is no one path, there is no set of directions that I can follow to get to Broadway. And so for somebody whose barriers are networking, essentially in an industry that depends on networking, how can we get autistic people into high-level positions when we've never been allowed into these spaces because it's inaccessible to us as people who struggle with networking? So that's been a really interesting conversation I've been having over and over, especially because of Ohio, where people have wondered, all of your firsts are all neurotypical people or are not autistic people, and then you have all these autistic assistants. How come? And it's like, well, because this is us opening the door. This is us creating those resume opportunities for people. I'm going to benefit from that. I'm very thankful, who've never been invited into this space before. And so I'm so thankful for Maestra and Rise, because they help facilitate that networking that can be so challenging. It's really easy for me. I know I might not know how to reach out to somebody and send them an email, but I can certainly go on a search and be like, I'm looking for a soprano saxophone player, who can I meet? And it does some of that work for me that otherwise would be just impossible because I wouldn't know where to start. So
Yeah. That's the Maestra directory coming in handy, right?
Yeah.
There are over 2,000 members now of the directory, and I think that I have a stat from 2021 that there were only 1,300 members back then. So it has really exploded in the last 3 years.
I was actually wondering how many people are in the Rise directory.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know?
Currently, I know I'm going to mess this up, but
I got it.
as of yesterday, because I just checked, 2,890 users. Yeah.
And growing.
And growing.
But I think, Nicole, you're right in identifying that it provides access to do it online.
Yeah.
As opposed to the old school way of having to show up in person. It's what November was talking about in terms of having the live theater being this precious, precious thing. The pandemic really affected so many things about our daily lives, but one of the main things is we all got connected over the internet in a way that we weren't before. I mean, how many Zoom meetings did we have? How many Zoom meetings do we still have? Because that's a habit. It's part of our ways to communicate. So Maestra has, the membership in the directory has really blossomed and bloomed from that experience as well.
There is an element of trust building that is like the undercurrent, right? And that's what we're really trying to figure out, because there is this narrative of scarcity, especially on Broadway and in theater, of if I get the job, you can't get into. So actually, what doors are we opening? And the trust building comes in, mind you, this thought's still forming as I'm going, so
I love it.
Please, you see the gears working. But there's trust building with those who are making the hiring decisions of you can go to the same 5 people, you can send out that same email to the same 5 candidates that you know of, but actually if you use this tool, you're opening up the floodgates to potentials. And I think we have to challenge that narrative of I'm going to go to someone I trust. We need you to take chances on someone you don't know. And actually by having these directories, it's fighting that narrative of it's dismantling the systems that we talked about before. What's serving you right now, but who is that actually serving? It's serving the same 5 people. So I really want to talk about, like, there is this undercurrent of we have to build the trust and challenge the narrative of scarcity. We can all move from the place of abundance. We can all feed from the same resources. And these are just moments, right? I think that's really powerful, but it is a mindset shift, and that's really hard. Especially, like, I'm thinking about with How to Dance in Ohio. They just made the space happen. That was a narrative and a mindset shift because they made the very conscious decision to do it. And then because they did that, what doors are they opening for future productions?
And you are both producers, so you also know that risk level is important. It is important to manage that when all that money does start pouring in for your, even an off-Broadway production will take $1 million, right? So your Broadway production. So, like, for example, I'm going to bring up the Maestra First Takes Holiday Edition again. I was able to work with those people, and they were able to see me work. And then Natalie Wilson was able to watch me work with her singers that we sourced from Circle in the Square. So she at least had that, experience of me working, and knew that I wasn't going to completely mess everything up. And I got an offer to work as a musical director of the new emerging writers play musical, the Rosetta Project, with Circle in the Square Theater School. So it is important, and it's such a cool event. Shout out to Judy, because it is important to be able to work with someone to at least get that sense. When I'm producing artists and I'm hiring musicians, I need that person to nail it quickly and get paid and move on. I don't have the time or resources or like the mental energy to deal with someone not knowing how to do it.
Yeah, and then but just think about like the fellowship and like opportunities, like the MD experience you had, because you were able to train, that helped prepare you and set you up for success. So we see all of these new fellowship opportunities that opened up, and I think they're so dope. I think they're so important because they are allowing marginalized folks to actually be in the room, so then they can be like, yes, I do have the skill sets required, but they're actually given opportunities to thrive.
Exactly. And going back to that education you were mentioning, like, I went to Juilliard for classical piano. I was there in the pre-college from 7 years old to 17 years old. So I can play the piano really well, but
it's different in the world.
Very different.
Like, things are shifted.
Solo classical pianist who also like music directed shows. So I set the tempo. And as a solo pianist, nobody needs to follow me. I'm the only one. Or if I'm playing with an orchestra, they'll follow me. But in the pit, no. But these opportunities for marginalized folks and people who aren't already getting those jobs, it's like going to school after you went to school. Like, you learn certain things that were useful in school, but it's not the full way to succeed on Broadway. I just learned by osmosis watching Dena, watching people play. One of you were mentioning how to, like, expressing in music, like, oh yeah, so like, how previous generations like, no, you got to do it this way. When we're talking certain pits and certain books, they don't want you to be musical. They need you to not be musical. They need you to be like mechanical, because that's what's called for that particular part. And that is completely outside my experience of anything. Sure. But you don't know that until you're in that experience and kind of learning by absorbing.
Right, because being playing key 2 at Wicked isn't just about playing. It's about patches and following a conductor and all kinds of things. And BJ was explaining this to me on the phone the other day, and I said, sounds like flying an airplane.
Yeah, and I've flown airplanes. I have flown Piper Cubs and the little Cherokees and stuff. It's more complicated than flying an airplane. If an airplane was that hard to fly, there would be a lot more crashes. So I did have the amazing experience of playing Key 2 on Broadway for Wicked, a couple shows. It's four pedals. So you got your volume pedal, your damper pedal, which changes to a Leslie on-off rotary, and then you have your patch change. So I was also using I was also using an iPad, so I have 2 more pedals to go forward and backwards for my music. So you're like, you don't want to hit this forward when you meant the patch forward. And then there's 2 more buttons for you, not even the 88 keys in front of you, 2 more buttons. If the patch, either you accidentally hit it or it just goes haywire and goes forward, you can go backwards. So that's just.
And the exit rows are down the aisle, and they'll be coming by with the beverage
The
cart.
plane is like, you make sure there's like no holes, make sure everything's stuck together. You turn it on, you push the throttle, and you pull, and you're in the air.
When you're conducting, there's the talkback pedal. So you've also got a pedal that turns on a mic. It turns a mic on and off. So you've got the talkback pedal, and then you've got an expression pedal. You've got your volume pedal. You've got your damper pedal, and then you've got more buttons that are like over here.
Like your Q-Lab and all that stuff.
And all the times I've ever seen a conductor at the beginning of a show on the telephone, you know, we're all backstage, all the actors are backstage saying, oh, they're ordering a pizza. No, they're not. They're probably dealing with a lot of pedals. You know.
Yeah. I think there's this narrative that comes with like inviting people into high caliber spaces like Broadway, where people think, oh, well, if they haven't been on Broadway, then they must not be good enough to get to Broadway. When actually it's really just a matter of the skill set is just a different skill set. It's not, you know, there's not more value placed on the skill set that you have to have for Broadway. But, you know, in my 150 plus shows that I've done as a pit musician and MD, like I've never had to fly an airplane while also doing this. You know, learning to play with a click is not something that's standard outside of Broadway spaces. Learning to run patches, even if you're used to playing with smaller community theaters, you might not be working with things like that. So there's just
There's a virtual technical workshop about
I'll
that.
bet there is. So the skills that you have to be on Broadway are unique to Broadway, and so it has nothing to do with a person's ability and everything to do with they just haven't had the opportunity. They haven't had the fortune, because so much of it is fortune. I wouldn't have gotten How to Dance in Ohio if I didn't audition for it. I auditioned to be in the show. Missed my callback. Oh no! Thought my life was over.
Oh,
and
but
then
here you are.
yeah, and then I'm just walking down the street and I get a call from the music supervisor. We need a music assistant. Like that's really how, that's how it happens. And there's such an element of luck, and so it's so easy to look back and at where you've been, because a lot of these people have been there, and it's easy for them to forget that they were there once. At one time they hadn't been on Broadway, but now that they're there, now that that's what they see, it's hard to shake that, like, you know, bringing new people in does not mean settling.
And the music supervisor, Mary Mitchell Campbell, or no?
Not at that time.
Okay, okay.
Supervisor.
Okay.
But, yeah.
No, but I love what you're saying about, you know, not forgetting, remembering that at one point we were all just starting out, you know. So thinking about what you were saying, like remembering that we were all beginners at one point, that we all needed that collaborative help, that space held for us. What do you think about when you think about the future? What do you think about how you, as a Maestra member, a RISE member, are in a position now to help the next person who's just like you, behind you, in the pipeline, so to speak, achieve what they want to achieve?
Well, I'm a big cheerleader for Gen Z and younger babies. I honestly see them as the leaders. I'm learning from them. And I think the main thing is to let them cook.
My 13-year-old says that all the time. Let me cook. Always.
Yeah, there's, you know, sometimes, you know, the people that I work with, they're established and they tend to look at the younger generation and sort of be like, oh, they're doing their little cute thing. And it's like, no, actually, they know exactly what they're talking about. They're natural marketers. They know exactly who their target is. The people that you are trying so hard to get to buy your show, but you won't let them, you won't even listen to them, you know? So I really am a big advocate for being like, listen to that generation. Yeah. And actually keep what they're doing, because they're smart and they're savvy. And, you know, I've seen people half my age, you know, become, you know, YouTube sensations, and now they're running their own companies, you know? And so it's not a joke. It's actually, there is a institutional change happening within this country, and also just allowing the transfer of power.
Yes.
Allow the younger generation to step up into that role. Yes. Let's not clutch on to things so tough. And I'm, you know, I got a big mouth, and so I'm, everywhere I go, I'm like, you know, allowing, like, let's reduce that older generation fear, hyper competitive energy. And, and I have great hope for the future. I think they're already doing it, and we just need to let them.
I agree with you. I remember looking at my child with an iPad, and he had no fear of breaking it or failure. Contrast that with my dad. If he has an iPad in front of him, he's like, "Is this right? I don't know." But the fluency with which they embrace technology and social media and all the things you're talking about is absolutely, I think my son is. He's Generation Alpha because he's the one past Gen Z. So here they are, they are ready, and I love the idea of letting the younger generation succeed and highlighting them and uplifting them.
And listening. Listen.
Yeah.
And understanding that the world is, the only constant in life is change. So
Yes.
we have to constantly re-educate ourselves as systems are changing, like this is ongoing work. And once we understand that, we give ourselves grace to fail. And I think that's really important. And then also recognizing that someone took a risk on all of us sitting at this table, right? And without someone taking a risk on us, what our lives would have been different, how our lives would have been different. I think about that a lot, trajectory. And also understanding that there is no clear path in this industry. And that's kind of okay. But what access points or pathways can we provide to make it easier to jump in?
I'll also add, it's not just necessarily physically young, because I'm, new with my new opportunities, and I'm old. But I am very thankful for the opportunities I do have. But any kind of musician, I write songs in Nashville. It's you're constantly not the number one up there, or reaching the top 5 songwriter, or on legitimately on Broadway. As a chair or a music director. I'm not there, but what I can do, which is when what I was saying, producing records, making an extra extended effort to pass on and make it hold space for marginalized people, female and non-binary people of color. Was it you who told me that Georgia Stitt said you gotta look for these resources, you gotta look for these people, you gotta look for them like they're looking for your keys.
Car keys, right.
Because you are not gonna move ahead until you find them. And it's not good enough to be ketchup?
Yes, I want to today.
We won't use any ketchup.
That.
Right.
No.
Because 2,000 people, more than 2,000, we're out there.
Yeah.
You just gotta really make that extra effort and find people.
So people who have not been afforded these opportunities yet have been doing something.
Yes, they are doing the work.
They've been doing something.
Yeah.
It's not just you hit Broadway and hello, here we are now.
Right.
I'm a new baby. There's people's past experiences that can actually be leveraged as positives. Techie things, I'm sure, are positive when it comes to music directing. Even classical piano is something that not all music directors have as experience. In my case, I have a really extensive education background, and so particularly working with autistic actors, I'm really accustomed to differentiating instruction to different learning styles. And so that's something that, even though this is my first Broadway show, it's not my first rodeo. And so it's something that I was able to bring to the table that was new. So while you all have been on Broadway, these people have been having these rich experiences that they can contribute to things getting even better.
That's right. There's no such thing as an overnight success, right?
Right.
No such thing. Well, that's incredible. Thank you all so much for this discussion. We could have gone on for hours and hours.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for making the time, making the effort, for showing up, for getting glam, and for sitting down and listening to my stats.
Never had makeup on my face.
I love it. I love it. Thank you. Thank you all so much.
I want a seat at the table. Please give me a chair.